Hey everybody, this is Dr. Grover. I'm going to make a quick video for you to show you how I use PowerPoint to make slides that are, I think, pretty effective. These are the slides that I used in a video that you previously watched, one of the class lectures that I turned into online now that we don't have face-to-face classes. So you'll see the process that I went through. So what I've done previous to this is that I've already written my script. I have it in another window. Here it is. And I've used that script to create a series of storyboards on paper that I have on my desk in front of me. You can hear them right here. And I'll link to scans of those somewhere near this video. Now I'm using PowerPoint in a Mac, not a PC. So the functionality is the same, but the look might be different. You can see here that I have the ribbon at the top, just like a Windows PC does. And most of the options are in the same places and they look similar, although there is some differences at times. So you might have to look around just a little bit or look for slightly different icons and things like that, or in a different order if you're using a PC. One of the things I want to point out is that I like to focus on content before I focus on formatting, although I will do some formatting as I go. As I've gotten more effective and more practiced at making PowerPoints, and since I'm using a storyboard where I've already worked out some formatting issues there, I can condense some of those steps. But mostly I'm not interested in a bunch of flashy animations at first. I'm interested in just getting the content on there and making sure that it matches what I'm doing. So this is the process I'm going through, and these are the buttons that I press on PowerPoint to get things to actually happen. I apologize if you can hear my kids bonking around in the other room. I'm working from home now, like many of you, now that school's closed. So we'll just go with what we got. Okay, so I know from my my storyboard that I'm going to start with a title slide, and I already know what it's going to say, so I'm just going to type it in. Now the first thing I notice is that I hate the formatting here, but I'm not going to go in and choose a fancy design. Under the design tab, you can choose all these presets and say, oh, I want mine to be this, this is cute, I guess. There's this one with, like a stage. There's this purple one. And once you pick one over here, there's usually some different color options. You can click down and see. I could go with the green one or something like that. This stage one that has this wooden floor at the bottom. There's actually multiple versions of this. There's a concrete floor, and there's a kind of a blonde maple floor and a dark floor. I'm not thinking in terms of this because this is added. This is not this fancy design is not about me conveying information. This is just about how I dress the information. When you put formatting before content, you start to get the idea that the formatting matters more than the content, or that the formatting can solve problems in your content, and that's just not the case. The truth is, if the content's not clear, if you don't have the right content on your slides, it's going to distract, or it's going to compete with what you're saying rather than amplify or supplement what you're saying. You can also see that modern PowerPoint, at least my version, has all these design ideas and starts suggesting all of these templates from online, and I might be immediately captivated by the look of one of these and want to go with it and let it design it for me, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to exit out of that. I'm going to go to the basic. Oh, for the love. I do not want any design ideas. How do I even undo design ideas? There we go. I can undo through all my choices by hitting Control or Command Z. Get back to, all right. Get back to the basic. So this is the white template. It's got the default font. Now immediately, I don't like this font. I want to use a different font, and I could go ahead and change that. But the truth is, if I start changing it now, then I'm going to change it. I'm going to have to change it on every slide, and I don't want to get bogged down on that stuff. So I'm just going to leave it as is. Even though I don't love the look of this, I'm going to let it go. Okay, so I'm going to new slide. Now, I don't often use the preset layouts unless they really match what I'm doing because, for one thing, I don't want to have a primarily textual presence on my slides. I want the slides to work with what I'm saying, and since what I'm saying is the words, somebody can't really read the words on the slide and listen to the words coming out of my mouth and make sense of both at the same time. It's too hard to read two sentences or to listen and read at the same time. So I want mine to be primarily visual. When I do have text, I want it to be as sparse as possible. And this you know, the standard format of having a title for my slide and then having like a list of bullet points, that's not going to work in most situations. Now on my storyboard, my first slide actually has quite a bit of text on it, but it's text arranged in a visual format. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to layout and I'm going to choose blank. I want to start with a blank canvas and I will add what I want to this. So I'm going to add a text box by clicking text box, and I'm going to draw a box. And I'm going to type in here what I need it to say, which is team contract. What I'm making here, you might remember from seeing this presentation, is that I'm just going to have a timeline of the project with all the steps on it. And so I know I want those steps to be arranged vertically. And I know that PowerPoint can let me arrange things. So what I want to do is I want to just get one of these to look the way I want. Probably I want this maybe 24 Century Gothic. Is that what we're using? Okay, that's the default is Century Gothic. I'm not going to bother with that right now. So now that I have one, I'm just going to copy and paste it, and that way the formatting will be exactly the same. They'll all be laid out. You know, these are left aligned, and the borders and the size of the thing is all the same. So that way I don't have to, if I change the format, I don't have to change it on every one. So this is the next thing. Then I'll just copy and paste another one, pull it down. Doesn't really matter where it goes. Highlight all the text and write the next thing, which is analyze footprint. Go with the next one. Highlight it all. Write script. Grab the next one. Highlight it all. Change it to make slides. Grab the next one. Change the text to practice and refine. And one more in the step, which is to do the presentation. I'll just say present to keep these. I like that they all consistently start with a verb except for team contract. I guess I could make it make team contract. Make that a little wider so it's on one line like these other ones. Okay, so now I have all these. Now they're all jumbled, and something I can do, this is some basic formatting that I don't feel bad about doing right now, is I'm going to hold down the shift button and I can click multiple things. I could also draw a square or whatever and it'll grab them all. And then I'll go up here to arrange, which usually shows up in the home. Sometimes in some of these other ones it'll show up. But under arrange I have a lot of options, and I really like the align. Under align I can say, well, I want all of these to be on the center of the page, or centered with each other, and it'll do that. But I actually don't want that. What I want them is to be, I want them all to be aligned to the same left side, so they all look like they're lined up. I also want them to be equally spaced out. So I want the top one to be, let's see, I'm going to just highlight the top one. I'm going to grab, if I've highlighted the text, I can't hit up and down to move it. That'll move the cursor. But if I grab it and then click on the bordering box, then I can use my arrow keys to move this up or down, or I could grab it. So I'm just going to move this up. I want the top one to be about this high, and I want the bottom one to be, you know, towards the bottom of the page, maybe about that much. And now I want to space them all out equally. So I'm going to highlight all of them, come to arrange, go to align, and I'm going to distribute vertically. And that'll make them so they're all equidistant from each other. So I know they're all lined up on the left side. I don't remember if I moved that make team contract when I was goofing around, so I'm just going to realign. Yeah. So now they're all equidistant on the page, and I think they're more or less. If I want them to make sure they're equally centered, like there's the same amount of distance from the top to the bottom, I could also highlight them all, right-click, highlight them all. When I click on the last one, I'm going to right-click it and group them. So now it's treating them, I mean, they're still individual boxes, but it's treating them all as a huge group. And when I come to arrange here, I can align it to the middle of the page. Oh, and I don't know if you saw that, it moved up like 1 pixel. I had gotten it so close on my own. I can ungroup these if I don't want them to be grouped. I just come back to group and ungroup them, and then they're all individual things again. which might be useful. Now, well, I want this to appear like on a timeline, so I'm going to add a line shape, something that goes from, I mean, it's going to start from about the middle of that one to about the middle of this one. I can hold down I can make this line as big or as small as I want. If I hold down Shift, it will make sure that it is straight to the nearest 45 degrees. So I'm going to hold down Shift and get it right where I want it. I'm going to draw that line. Okay, now I can go to Shape Format, and when this line is highlighted, I can mess with it. So it's a line, so it doesn't have a fill, but it does have an outline. I don't want it to be blue. I want it to be black. I want it to be heavier. So right now it's a half point. I want it to be, I don't know, maybe 3 points. Oh yeah, I like the look of that. That seems about right. So now I need like stops on my timeline, so I'm going to put little circles. So here's a circle. I'm going to just come over here and draw a circle about the size I want. Now again, this circle can be any oval shape, but if I hold down the Shift button, it will be an exact circle, with a regular radius. I'm going to make this about the size I want it to be. That seems about right, right? While it's highlighted, I come over here to Shape Format, and I can say, well, I want, let's make it white inside, and let's give it a black outline, and make that outline the same as my line. So then it looks like, yeah, it looks like a subway stop. Now it's not lined up exactly. I could highlight it and then move it around to try and get it to line up with the line, and that looks more or less exact. But I could use my align. I could highlight both of them using the Shift and click on both. I can see that this one has the boxes and the green things there. And then you can see that on Shape Format, some of the alignment things have now, because it has room on the ribbon, it's expanded them. So here is a line, and I could align them centered with each other. I don't know that it moved at all, but now it should be perfectly centered. Now what I want to do is I'm going to copy and paste this until I have enough for each of my stops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right, now I've got 7 of them, and I got to put them where they go, roughly. Now one nice thing is PowerPoint will usually help you line things up. So as you move it around, it'll snap to various grids that it's imagining. So if I want this one to be lined up with the one above it, it'll kind of snap to it. If I want it lined up with that choose client, now it's freaking out because I have a bunch of stuff in the way. So if I move these out of the way, just get them out of here, it should register. Yeah, it'll center it with choose client. So now this one is centered on the ones I would choose client, and it's centered with the one above it. And so it's exactly where I want it to be. It looks like a subway map with subway stops. You can check it out. Now it's showing me that it's equidistant the same way that the other ones are, plus it's centered with the words and it's centered with the line. There's other ways to do this same thing. I could put it on the line and then highlight it and highlight this and have them aligned with each other using the align. I could say, oh, we'll make sure that these are the middle. Sometimes you have to do things in the right order, because if I move the middle, then this right script is going to move up to match this one, or they're going to move towards each other, and then it won't be even with the other ones around it. So another thing I could do is I could group the right script with the I could center it with the circle and group them together and then have them move as a single unit. Now, there's a lot of things I can do to get things to line up. It just takes some practice. That is not where I want it. I think that's where I want it. Also, things don't have to be perfectly aligned, do they? This one is weird. That should do it. It just needs to be visually consistent enough that my viewer sees it as that I've done a good job. That ought to be it. All right, so something like that. Now I think that now that I've got these how I want them, I'm going to highlight everything, and I'm going to hold down Shift and right click and group them together. So now this is like, right, I can move it up and down, I can move it left and right, but the circles aren't going to move relative to the line, and I just want this to be I blew it, didn't I? You see that? I grouped the circles, but I didn't group the line. That's hilarious. I'm going to hit undo any of my moving, and I'm going to hold down shift, click the line. Nope, I got to hold down shift and right click the line, and then I think now I've grouped everything. Yeah, I have. And I can move this closer. Man, that was a lot of work, but I like the look of this. On my storyboard, I say here, I want to show this project timeline, and then I want to highlight the current step that we're on, which would be this, this presentation is about analyzing the footprint. I can, I can emphasize that in lots of ways. I can make this all caps. I can make this one bigger. I can make it a different color. That sounds like the easiest way to me is to make it a different color. Now the problem is I don't really have a color palette picked out, so I don't know what color I'm going to have that. So I'm going to come back and do that later. Let's move on to the next slide. There's a slide here that I'm not sure if I'm going to use it. I'm not sure if it's necessary. So I'm going to skip to the next one, which is a section header. Now that's one of the places where I might actually use the section header, which is, it's like a large, generally centered heading. So this one's supposed to say rhetorical situation. And that's all it needs to say. This stuff here, the click to add text boxes, I don't have to delete those. If I go to full screen view, those things disappear unless they have something in them, so that's fine. It's suggesting all sorts of fancy layouts, but I'm going to do my best to ignore that. I just want rhetorical situation. Now I go to the next slide. You can see whenever I click new slide, it's going to give me whatever layout I was previously working on. So I might have to go back to blank or back to title and content or whatever. This next one is it's on my picture here. I'm drawing a rhetorical triangle, and it goes along with a paragraph that talks about a quick review of how the rhetorical situation works. So again, I'm going to draw a shape. I'm going to come here to shapes. I'm going to choose the triangle. I'm going to draw a triangle. I'm going to use the shift to make it an equilateral triangle, and I'm going to make it roughly as big as I think it should be, maybe about that big. I could center this on the page. When you have just one thing highlighted, it doesn't center the centers of the multiple things. It centers it to the slide. So why don't I put this one in the center of the slide and in the middle of the slide, so it's perfectly centered. Now I'll come over here, shape, and I don't want a filled triangle. I want an empty triangle, so I'm going to go no fill, or I could go white if I want to, not have it be see-through. And for the outline, I'm just going to do a black outline. I might change that later when I choose a color scheme. And let's see, the 3-point. Is that visible? I have to kind of think about how that's going to look in a screencast when I record this. Is this going to be enough? I'm kind of thinking because this is a key shape, I'm going to show this a lot in my presentation. I kind of want it to be a little beefier. I can also add effects, right? That's what this one is for effects. They can have a shadow, a reflection, and things like that. And that might be something I want, but I don't want to get bogged down in thinking about that fancy stuff that might add polish but doesn't add meaning to this. So I'm just going to leave it alone for now. Perfect triangle, nothing important. Now the triangle is going to be labeled. So again, I can just choose to make some text boxes. Text box is usually the first thing under shapes. You might also see it in other places. For example, under insert, you'll see text box shows up. Under draw, no, it's not under draw or design or transitions. On home, it shows up next to text as its own, and also under shapes. So I'm going to draw a text box. I'm just going to put it here towards the top. It doesn't need to be exact. And here I'm going to write speaker. That's the first one. So I'm going to have it say speaker, message, audience, and I'm going to want those to all be the same font, the same size. So I'm going to make sure I have it the way I want it now. So I'm going to highlight this. I'm just going to make it a little bigger. I think, it needs to be readable, but leave room for other things. I think that's the right size. 28 seems good. Now I'm going to want to have these be bound. Like I'm going to have this centered here on the point, and I could center that visually like this. But it'd probably be smarter to center it in my box, and then it doesn't matter how big my box is. I can highlight my box, and I can move it, and it'll say, well, here's the center of your box lined up with the center of your triangle. It'll just snap it to that grid. Or I can just highlight this thing wherever I have it, and I can go to arrange, and I can say, well, put it in the center of the thing, and now I know it's centered. Or I could highlight both these things, and I could say, hey, align the center of these things. Now that might move it off of the center of the slide, so I'm not going to do that here. But I like the look of that. I could cheat this down a little bit if I wanted a little closer or something like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste this text box, move it down here, change it to audience, and copy and paste another one and move it over here and change it to message. The nice thing about that I've centered these is that they appear equal distant from either side of the text box, and it doesn't matter if the text box is too big or too small or whatever. I can now line these up so that they are even with each other, and I could, if I get one kind of where I want it, I kind of want this E to be just overlapping the edge of this triangle. That's what looks right to me. Then I can get the other one to do it. You see here now, suddenly the box is, let's see, is that quite right? The word audience is a little wider than the word message, so even though the box's center is equal distant from all the lines that show up, it's not exactly right. The A overlaps the point more than this E overlaps the point. So again, I could visually align that the way I want, and then no one knows if that's perfect or not. It doesn't really matter at this point. Now I'm going to have an arrow appear. So I'm going to look over here for an arrow. Do I want a curvy arrow? I think I want a curved arrow. I always have a problem with curved arrows I can never get them to do what I want them to do. A curved arrow connector. I'm going to pick that. I want it to come out from the middle of this thing, and I want it to kind of just jot out this way. And you grab this thing and you make it do something, but it never looks good to me. I mean, that looks terrible. I don't know. I get frustrated with the curved arrows. So what I might do is just, for the sake of simplicity, settle for a ready-made arrow. Or they have these drawn arrows. These arrows are, these block arrows are shapes. Like these ones look like they're curved arrows, but really they are they can't be manipulated in as many ways as I think I might want. Like for example, this already looks bananas. Wonder if, all right, if I do it like this, then there's all these little points on the arrow. I don't know what they do, but I can mess with them. Oh, okay. So this can, oh, I kind of like that. So what I could do is make the arrow, oh yeah, make the arrow skinnier. Oh, I'm loving this, you guys. I'm discovering new things. Not sure what this one's doing exactly, but I like that the point is now kind of in keeping. And check it out. I'm going to turn this a little bit. Yeah, is that how I want it? I think I want to make this arrow a little less and turn it a little more. That's kind of how I drew it in my my little schematic, something like that. Now, I don't like the format of this. I don't want it to be a, let's see, does this, okay, I want it to have no outline. So it's just a colorful arrow. I don't know what color it's going to be, but I'll just make it red for now. I don't want it to have any shadow or anything at this moment. I'm just going to leave it like that. Yeah, I like that. Okay. And then I'm just going to grab a text box, copy and paste it, move it up here, and I want this one to say conditions of success. Now I got to ask myself, do I want it to be the same size as everything else? Do I want it to be on one line or two lines? And I can mess with that to make it what I want it to be. I want the arrow to point at it. Yeah, how about like that? Okay. This is the basics here. Putting in shapes and words. Let me show you a little bit about animations, just so you can see how that works if you've never done it before. Now, the text for this part has me explaining something. And I don't want this all to appear at once, because if I'm talking and all of this material appears, the reader's not going to listen to me. They're going to start reading speaker, message, audience, conditions of success. That's only going to take them a second or two, but they're also going to start puzzling about the meaning of the shape and the arrow in the context of that. And I don't want them to do that. Instead, I want them just to consider things as I say them. So I want these words to appear as they're mentioned in my script. I've made a note on my storyboard what order that they are going to appear in, and I know that speaker is first. So what I can do is I can come here to animations, and I can choose something. I'll choose this text box, and then I'll choose how I want it to appear. I can have it just flash on. I can have it, there's all these stupid things. My go-to, if I want things to look simple and direct and not flashy for stupidity's sake, I just want it to look elegant, is I do the fade. I want it to fade in. I don't want it to just appear. That looks trashy. I want it to fade, but I also want it to fade rather quickly. The default is half a second, and that's kind of too slow. I'm going to go for a quarter second, a fourth of a second. So I just do that. So this little one appears to show that this is the first thing that's going to happen. And I can hit this play and stop, and it'll show me that in this small thing. It'll show me that when the slide begins, everything's on it, and speaker will appear relatively quickly. Now I want message to appear next, so I have to come pick fade, change the time. I want audience to appear next, so I've screwed it up. So I'm going to put an animation on audience. Oops, I want it to be a quarter of a second. Now you can see that they're in the wrong order, so I can highlight this one, I can move it down, or I can pull it up and down to get them in the right order. And then when I hit play, speaker, audience, message should all happen. Yeah, there we go. And then lastly, I want this one and this one. So I can hold down shift and highlight them both, and then I can choose, I want those to come in, and I want them to come in at this. And look there, they're both number 4, so they come together. I can do that another way. If I don't know what I'm doing, I can say, well, I want the arrow to come in next. And then I want conditions of success to come in next. And then if I decide later, oh, I actually wanted them to come in together, you can see this is 4 and then this is 5. So I'd have to click my mouse or my keyboard twice to get them both to appear. I can come to 5, and I can come here to timing, and I can say, actually, I want this to happen with the previous one, and it just changes it to 4. It groups them together. I can also change the timing from here. You can build in a delay and a repeat and things like that. That's not stuff that you're probably going to need. Timing is pretty much the only one I'm using that I typically use. Now let's see, can we watch this? Yeah, there's a preview button up here. There it goes. Right, it's really fast because it's not putting any. Here, let's show you in the slideshow. Let's see, I just want my slideshow to appear small, so I'm just going to set a setting. So here, if I go to my slideshow, you can see that I didn't put an animation on the triangle, so it's there. It's going to be there from the beginning. If I click my spacebar, speaker shows up, then audience, then message, then conditions of success show up together, and I like that. You can see that, right? They don't just appear; they fade in, but they fade in really quickly. If it's a slow fade in, it's like you stop talking and everybody looks at the screen and they wait for a full second or half a second for things to show up. I kind of like the quarter second because there's no slowdown in what you're doing. So there we go. That's how we do some simple animations. Now let's say one more thing. Let's say that I want in my next slide. This is actually the next slide. In my next slide, I want to change the speaker, message, and audience. I want them to become pictures. I want to include pictures. Let me talk about how you include pictures. All right. First, what I'm going to do is I could animate a bunch of stuff on one slide, but it becomes overwhelming. So I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to highlight slide 4 and hit copy, which is Command or Control C, or I could come up here to the edit and hit copy. And then I'm going to click below it so this little line appears, and I'm going to hit paste, which is Command or Control V, or I could come up here and actually hit paste. So now I have 2 identical slides, and they have identical animations on them. I don't want this one to animate these things, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to delete all the animations from the second slide. Right? Otherwise, it would animate everything, and then animate everything again. I just want the second slide to begin exactly where the other one left off. And what I want to do is I want to replace the words with some pictures. So, right in my speech, I'm going to start talking about the rhetorical situation of me trying to convince my wife to watch a scary movie. So I want my face or a face to pop up for speaker and a different one to pop up for audience, and the message I want to be a scary movie. So I need to grab some pictures from the internet. 1 second while I grab some pictures from the internet. Okay, I'm back. I had to make my kids lunch and find the pictures, and a whole bunch of stuff happened. It's been like an hour and a half, but I'm back. Okay, so I want to change the words into images. So the first thing that's going to happen, right, on this previous slide, they're all going to appear, and then the next transition is that speaker is going to disappear and be replaced by a picture I found on the internet. It's just a white dude with a beard emoji, because that's a good way of representing myself. So again, I mean, you resize these like you resize anything. Nowadays, I think the default is that they maintain the aspect ratio, but sometimes for whatever reason it might get stretched. Oh, if you grab the side, you can stretch it and stuff, and that's obviously not good. If for whatever reason it seems like it's stretching in a funny way, when you resize it, if you hold down the shift button, it will maintain that aspect ratio just the way you want. So what I want to have happen is it comes to the next slide, and suddenly instead of the words, there's my face. And then I want the same thing to happen. I want audience to change to my wife's face. Now here's the thing. Right now, let's see, if we come here, let's play it, right? It says speaker, audience, message, conditions of success, and then boom, it suddenly turns into my face. And I want the audience to turn in. I could animate it so that this audience disappears and my wife's face shows up, but what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to copy and paste the slide I'm on, and this way I can just delete audience and bring in emoji of my wife. So you want to get this roughly the same size as mine. Seems a little big, doesn't it? A little bit smaller. There we go. Right? And so now what happens is appear, 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 change, change. Oh, that's great. The only downside is I have a fade transition for the animations, and then it's just a snap between the slides. So something I can do is I can actually come here to transitions as part of the ribbon, and I can put a transition. This is the change between slides, from slide to slide, not within the slide, but between the slides. And so I'm going to choose the same one. I'm going to choose fade, and you can see that the default is 0.7 seconds. It's unbearably long. Do you want to see? I will show you. That's a quarter second, quarter second, quarter second, quarter second. Oh, 0.7. I feel like I was holding my breath for an hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that. I want it to be the same, quarter second. And then I'm going to do this button, apply to all. Bam. Now every slide has these little arrows, and now it's going to be everywhere. So the viewer can't tell that this isn't just one slide animated, because the transition in the animation is the same, and that looks great. And that's a really quick way of changing things. So now I'm going to copy and paste this slide, and on this one I'm going to delete message, and I'm going to bring in my scary movie image. I grab the Shining. Now you can see that this has a lot of black on it. It needs to be cropped. When you have the picture highlighted, it usually defaults over here to the picture format part of the ribbon. You might still be on some other part of the ribbon, and if you're not on picture format, if you're not on a picture, that part of the ribbon won't be there. But if you highlight an image, then that'll show up and you can choose it. And I can do things to that, including crop. If I choose crop, it's going to put these crop bars on it. And I can just pull that one down and say, oh yeah, that's what I want. And then when I hit crop again, bam, that's cut out. I don't want this to be that big. Shining. You know, I want it to look a little whimsical, so let's, like it's a DVD that I just threw out there or something. So I just grabbed that rotation bar. There it is. You know, I can also add effects. Like if I want this to appear like it's sitting on top of a table, I might add a little shadow. So I come here to the shadows and I can just choose the one I want. I can also go here to shadow options and it'll pull up an option here on the side. I can make the shadow any way I want. That's a lot of work. I'm not going to bother with that. Let's just grab a default shadow. Bam, there it is. It looks like it's floating a little bit. No, actually, now that I have it on, nah, not important. Okay, so this one appears, this one appears, this one appears, and then copy, paste, and last thing, I want conditions of success to become a thumbs up emoji. That seems really, really big. Now here, do you see how this picture doesn't have a transparent background, so it's on top of this? There's another thing I can do. If I'm on the picture, I can right click it and I can choose to send it back or send it to the front, right? So all these images are like in a stack, like if they're papers on your desk, some are on top of other ones. And I mean, it can be a huge stack of things. I can actually send this back, send it to the very back or send it backwards, and then it'll go back. Sent backwards will send it one back in the layer. Now you see that didn't do anything because I actually sent it behind, one of these other ones that's not overlapping. So if I send to the back, it'll definitely be below the arrow and I can have it be where I want it to be. So there we go. I put some pictures on here and they have the appearance of being animated. Let me show you one more time. These come up as I'm saying the lines. Boom. Should we try that once with the script? See what it looks like? This is really what I do. I'll do simple layout and animation. I still haven't decided on color, and that's why I haven't spent too much time with things, because I might change the layouts of things or the colors or sizes of things. But just the simple version of this, I can test it to see if it's what I want to be. So let's read the script real quick. Okay, I got my script printed out and I'm ready to go. I'm just going to start on this slide. And what I'm checking for here is the timing. I want to make sure I don't have too many quick transitions, but also, not too few, especially because I know this is going to be a screencast. And with a screencast, I want to make sure that, since the viewer can't see my face or my body language, and I can't, hold their attention with that, the screen needs to change much more often than it would change if I was going to be standing in front of the screen giving this face-to-face, and I would be most of the visual interest, and this would just supplement, because this is all of the visual interest in a screencast. I need to make sure the changes happen pretty often, but not too often. So here are the words that go along with this. It says, as with most things in our class, analyzing web presence comes down to understanding the rhetorical situation. A quick review. We illustrate the rhetorical situation with a triangle, the points of which represent the three critical elements of the situation: the speaker, the audience, and the message. As you well understand at this point, if you change any part of this triangle, the rhetorical situations change. That is, the conditions of success change. For example, imagine that I want to convince my wife to watch a scary movie with me tonight. To convince her of my message, I need to carefully consider what I know of this rhetorical situation. In this case, I know my wife loves scary movies, so the conditions of success are very undemanding. I can just casually mention that I was thinking of watching The Shining, and she's in. But now imagine blah, blah, blah. Okay, so there it was. What'd you notice? I noticed that there was a bit of a, there was a sentence, I think these changes didn't come too often, and they weren't reading changes. Like, they didn't have to read something. When the words speaker, audience, and message, when these appeared, I was saying the word as it was. And so there's not a competition between what I was saying and what the person is reading. So even though they're real quick changes, they really supplement what I'm saying rather than compete with it. Then I had that sentence where, I said me, my wife, and the film. There was this long sentence where nothing happened. I need to carefully consider what I know of this rhetorical situation. In this case, I know my wife loves scary movies, so the conditions of success are very undemanding. That's two pretty long sentences with nothing happening. So I didn't realize this, I didn't storyboard this, but now that I'm seeing it, I'm thinking that I need to add something. What I need to add is a heart or something that can appear to show, when I say I know that she loves scary movies. Is there a heart shape? Boom, there's a heart shape. I don't even have to go dinking around on the internet to find one. I'll hold shift to make it the way I want it. Come here to shape format. Obviously, I'm going to want it to be red. We don't need an outline on it. I could put a bit of a shadow on it might be nice. Kind of show that it's floating above her. I'm going to rotate it just a little bit and move it, right about there, right? Now, I have a problem. I was just doing that on some random slide. Oh, it ended up being the exact right slide. But I want this to appear after the shining changes, right? So I'm going to come back to animations and just make sure that this one pops in. Now, is it possible that I want to use a different animation for this to appear? Sure. Do I need to think about that now? No. And frankly, I find almost all of the transitions, all these animations to be distracting. Unless I have a very good reason for one to happen, I'm not going to use it. Okay, so one last check to see how we like the pacing here. Quick review. We illustrate the rhetorical situation with a triangle, the points of which represent the three critical elements of the situation: the speaker, the audience, and the message. As you well understand at this point, if you change any part of this triangle, the rhetorical situation changes, that is, the conditions of success change. For example, imagine that I want to convince my wife to watch a scary movie with me tonight. To convince her of my message, I need to carefully consider what I know of this rhetorical situation. In this case, I know my wife loves scary movies, so the conditions of success are very undemanding. I just casually mentioned that I was thinking of watching a movie, The Shining, and she's in, right? That worked pretty good. It was starting to see that having conditions of success remain here on the page through this is maybe not what I want, but this is the fine tuning that I can do later, right? I could make the conditions of success part of this disappear at the same time that my face comes on and then reappear down here when I want. But this, I don't need to know this in advance, right? I'm building this piecemeal. I'm focusing on content. Then I can come back and look at, is the timing right, or are there little things that need to happen? Okay, so hopefully this shows you some of the main functionality of PowerPoint and how, at least one experienced user uses these things to create something that isn't a mess, which is what most PowerPoints end up being. You can obviously see the finished product in the screencast that I made that you watched you watched it last week, I believe, for class. So you can see how the decisions I've started here, how they changed between now and when I finished it. And you can judge for yourself how the pacing turned out. Was it the right amount for a screencast? Was it too many, too few? Does it compete with the content that's being spoken or not? Okay, hope this was helpful. Remember, you can always ask questions in Slack. I'm happy to, I could do a screen share with you over Zoom and show you how to do these things on your actual slides if you're having trouble making it happen. Google Slides has most of the same functionality. It might be called something different or be arranged a different way. But beware, Google Slides, Apple Keynote, these things, they all want to kind of say, let us design it for you. And you don't necessarily want that to happen. This is a perfectly appropriate design. It's just white on black. It's not gorgeous, but it's very, very simple and readable, and that's more important than it being pretty. It should be aesthetically pleasing, but more than that, it needs to supplement and amplify what's being said. Okay, I've spoken enough. I'll talk to you later.